What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. We are now breaking down our projected lineups for opening night of this season. We have a couple more signings that have come in here. Josh broke down the new signings in his last video, solo episode. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go over to the rest of our YouTube channel, click through our other videos, like, comment, subscribe there. But make sure you show some love to Josh's last video where he broke down the Nick Ritchie, David Kampf signings. But now with these guys in the lineup, our cap space is absolutely maxed out. Like, there is $0 left in the cap if you go and look at Cap Friendly right now. I'm sure there's still some room for moves if Kyle Dubas and those guys move some people around. Maybe guys like Ilya Mikheyev, Pierre Engvall are on their way out. But that could be determined by the potential starting lineups for night one. So with that being said, Goody, let's get into it right away here. Our projected opening lineups, these aren't like what we're hearing is going to be out there. These aren't like any rumors or anything like that. This is strictly based on what we ourselves see. What is your opening night starting lineup? Let's go with the forwards first.
So for myself, first line, obviously you're going to have Austin, you're going to have Marner playing together. I've put in Nick Ritchie, the big boss himself. He's got skill. He's got physicality. I've been begging for someone to kind of go one way on that line. Hyman sort of was a tweener. That's the way I put it. Nick Ritchie, if he's going one way, he's going to be bruising people. And at least he will pick up points because he's capable. You know, I'm not going to say he's going to go out there and light it up, but he was a point every other game for the Bruins last year. People considered that a down year for him. They better not be writing him off at age 25, though. I think he'll be all right. And if you have a guy bruising people on that line, protecting our top players, I like that.
Yeah.
Line two.
I'm on the same page as you. Before you go on, I'll just jump in there because I don't have really anything to add to that. It's like I'm on the same page. Nick Ritchie, too. The other thing is him signing a 2-year deal. He's going to be looking for big money coming out of this contract. It walks him right to a UFA year. And I think that that's only a bonus for the Leafs, like signing these guys to these 1-2-year contracts, because all they're going to be looking for is an improvement on their salary coming out of that, which in order to do that, you have to perform. And for the Leafs, if these guys come here, they perform and they demand more money by the end of their tenure as a Leaf, whether or not the Leafs can re-sign them, I think that's a bonus because they've come here, put on a clinic, deserve more money by the time they leave. That means they perform well as a Maple Leaf, which is only good for this team. The other thing here is I agree with you completely that night in, night out, he is a physical body. He's going to run around out there. Well, not run around, but like he's going to go out there and just run guys over, hit guys through the boards, create space, and be a scary presence on the ice with Matthews and Marner.
Yeah, he might even convince Matthews to get out there and be throwing around his body a little bit more. I swear, having Joe Thornton on the team made Matthews a more physical player. Didn't want to look soft in front of Jumbo. Having Ritchie blow up people on the line with them, I don't know. I think it could be contagious, but that's besides the point. They're going to be scoring goals, racking up points, and Ritchie will be chipping in occasionally as well, but doing that role we just talked about. My second line, I've got Bunting, Tavares, and Willie. I'm going to be straight up out of the gate here. I don't know a ton about Bunting. I've looked through his stats, very little sample size, so apparently the NHL doesn't know a ton about him either, but from what we can see, he's surprisingly really good. Like, I like what I see from Bunting on paper. I can't speak much of an eye test to all of this, but I think that based off of his production out of the gate in his career, this is a guy who could potentially go on your second line, especially when you don't have a ton of left wing depth. So I think you give him the benefit of the doubt to play with skilled players with your team as the season begins. Tavares and Willie, those guys will be sticking together. But for line two, that's what I'm going with. You want me to go straight to line three, or do you want to comment on that at all?
No, go ahead. Go to line 3 here, because I think that once we go down from lines 2, 3, and 4, we have a little bit of variance here in our line. So I'll let you finish out your lineup because there are some significant differences.
Okay, so line 3, I've got Robertson, Kerfoot, Kase. So here is, I think we mentioned this before we got on the pod. This is probably where the biggest difference will be with Robertson there. A lot of people talking about whether or not he's going to actually be with the Leafs, the big lineup, or he's going to be with the Marlies. This is sort of my ideal lineup that maybe even come mid-season that we're rolling with when everyone's fully into swing. That's what I'm hoping for. I'd like to see him in the big league lineup. And if it means you need to put him on the third line, so be it. Line 4, Wayne Simmonds, Jason Spezza, Ilya Mikheyev. Yes, I've put Mikheyev all the way down to line 4 from playing on the second line at times a lot last season. He's made the jump down there to our final group. I think he needs to start proving himself again. Less pressure. Maybe he'll start finishing more because that was his biggest issue. Opportunities all the time, but just no finish for Mikheyev. I'm hoping he can figure it out playing against, I guess, easier opponents on a fourth line matchup system. And, Wayne, Spezza, Mikheyev, there's some decent speed there. I know Spezza's older, but Wayne and Ilya, I do like their ability to get to pucks. They're quick. There's some hands on that line too. I'm all right with that fourth line, but that's my forward lineup so far. What's yours?
So I've got the exact same fourth line. I kind of see it the same way that you do, that Mikheyev, he can be relied on less, and then he can still penalty kill there. It also gives him an opportunity to create chances on just based on his sheer speed. And he's not going to be relied upon to score because as much as Spezza and Simmonds are older guys, they've got the hands in that lineup. They're the guys of the three of them, Spezza and Simmonds, that are going to go out there and be able to score and put in rebounds. So even if Mikheyev is just flying down the wing as fast as he can and Spezza and Simmonds are following him up, and then they just put home rebounds, I'm completely fine with that. I don't care if Ilya Mikheyev scores a single goal if he has 30 assists next year. I'm completely good with that. And if he can still get on the ice and kill penalties, I know it's a little bit much to have a guy at I think he's 1.645 mil to be playing on your fourth line. That being said, the cap, it fits in the cap. So, it's not necessarily a concern if you have to have that guy there. And it's not like you're looking up and down this lineup going, oh my God, we have guys making way much more money in spots that they shouldn't be. So, that amount of money, I'm fine with it being on the fourth line. So, I like that fourth line as well.
I think moral of the story with Mikheyev is let's set the bar low for him going into this season.
Yeah, agreed. We can't be looking at this guy as a world beater. His first year here, he scored a lot of goals, ended up with that brutal injury, takes a while to come back, doesn't really get his goal scoring touch back last year at all, and it's kind of, okay, what is this guy? So let's take it with a grain of salt going into this season, slowly work into it, see what he is, give him his opportunity to develop up the lineup. But our major differences come here within the second and the third line. You put in a guy that I did not put in, and my reasoning is, so Nick Robertson, you have him on the third line. I did not put Nick Robertson in my lineup because part of my concern is that I don't see him slotting into the first two lines, at least to start the season. And if you're watching this video, just keep in mind that these are the lineups that we're projecting for opening night. So I don't see him in the lineup to start this season. And if I don't think that if he can't crack the top two lines, then I don't think that Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas are going to want him playing with this Leafs squad strictly based on a development thing. They're going to want him playing a lot of minutes, getting his confidence up. Yes, it is important to get experience at the NHL level, but in the AHL, you do get experience playing against pros, playing against men, and that is something that Nick Robertson can still learn from, and he's clearly not earned the trust and the confidence of Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe to this point. Maybe he's done some things in the offseason that we haven't seen, and maybe he'll do some things from camp. But at this current moment, I just can't see him fitting in the top two. And I think personally, if he doesn't fit in the top two, they'd rather have him in the minors developing, getting that experience under his belt, and playing more minutes, being heavily relied upon before he ends up making the jump. Now, one thing that, and this isn't even a player in, player out thing, but I kind of have this, I don't know, I liked Alex Kerfoot on the wing last year. I liked what I saw him do playing with William Nylander in the playoffs. And with John Tavares coming back, and he's, by all accounts, he's going to start the season, I would like to see Kerfoot, Tavares, and Nylander together on that second line. Part of it is a little bit because you're handcuffed from the cap. Do you really want a guy who's making $3.5 million playing third and or fourth line? I wouldn't. And if he's playing third line center, that's fine. But just to kind of pull into my third line projection here, I see David Kampf being the third line center, and I see Jason Spezza being locked in at the fourth line center. And the reason I see David Kampf being the third line center is because he is a true centerman who wins faceoffs and takes a lot of them. So I think he beats Kerfoot out in that position, and I think that based just positionally, even how they play, Kerfoot is more adaptable to play the wing. So I would slide him up to that second line, see what he can do with Nylander and Tavares back now, because he was productive with Nylander in the playoffs, and I would move him up into that position. And then moving on to the third line, I keep Michael Bunting. I put him on that third line left wing. I would like to see him have the opportunity to move up in the lineup, and whether that means he jumps to the first line, as a few people have projected, or he ends up slotting into the second line, or some things get shuffled, or some guys get traded to move guys around. I would love to see him play above his contract. I can't put him beyond the third line at this current moment because I think his NHL sample size is far too small for me to have that much confidence in him. And I just can't confidently be like, that's a second or first line player just because this guy has 21 games played last year and he had 10 goals, 3 assists. I just personally can't put him into that top 2. So I'm comfortable with him being on the third line. And then I have him on the left side beside David Kampf and Andre Kasha. I like Kasha being there on that third line right wing. That's where you have him as well. And then David Kampf, I just see him being a locked in third line center, shutdown role, defensive guy, penalty killing, takes a lot of face-offs. Bam. You don't worry about face-offs anymore. You don't worry about late game situations, and you don't worry about the penalty kill because David Kampf can play a lot of those minutes.
I actually do really like your explanation for bumping up Kerfoot to the second line there. And you think about the way he ended the playoffs, he's only showed us good things as of recent. And you're right, with him having that kind of cap hit for morale reasons, not that that's really a big deal, but yeah, maybe give him the benefit of the doubt, starting him out on the second line there. A lot of different sites for some reason are projecting Bunting to be on the first line.
Yeah.
You named a reporter who projected that as well.
Yeah, James Myrtle, from The Athletic.
Yeah, and I've seen it in a few different places. I agree. That's a little aggressive, but I assume, and I out the gate said that I don't know enough about Bunting, but when I'm seeing all of these, I like to temper it with a little bit of, okay, maybe there is something there. His stats are clearly good. People are saying he's a first line player for Toronto. Mm-hmm. I don't really buy into that, but I landed him there in the second. But I do like your explanation on what to do with Kerfoot. I could see him actually slotting in nicely on the wing, but the real point of difference here that it all stems from is whether or not Robertson's in the lineup. Mm-hmm. I just don't like our left wing depth at all. It's still not bad. It's not atrocious, but there's a clear lack of scoring unless Bunting just goes off the way that everyone's projecting him to. So that's why I really wanted to find some opportunity to get Robertson into the lineup, play during the playoffs. So clearly our team values him as an asset like that. I just feel like Robertson, he could maybe swap with Bunting at some point throughout the season.
Oh, yeah. I don't disagree that they could be interchangeable pieces. Yeah, for sure.
They could be for sure. But at the same time, I just want to inject a little bit of more scoring prowess because I don't know what kind of player we're going to get with Kasha just because of injuries, right? He's historically been great, had 20 goals last time we saw him on a line with Getzlaf. Really good, but he's basically been unconscious since that point with concussions. Just terrible stuff for the guy. I don't mean to laugh like that. It's just he literally hasn't had any kind of health the past stretch in his career, but he's going to be back with our team and hopefully healthy. But even then, we got to check in and see what kind of player he's going to be. I really like the idea of Robertson being a high volume scorer, low in your lineup, and he's also going to be facing guys who aren't top end if your line matching properly. So personally, I don't hate it, but I also understand the perspective of wanting him to develop in the Marlies, getting a ton of confidence, more reps, all that stuff. But I don't know. He looked really good eye test wise. I know he doesn't have necessarily the points to support it, but eye test wise, I think he's looked good even in the NHL. So I'd like to start the season with him with the big league or the big team.
Yeah, I would like to see what he brings when it comes time for exhibition games and camp and stuff. But just based on what we've seen from him this past year and the excitement surrounding Michael Bunting, it kind of seems as though Michael Bunting is for sure getting himself in this lineup. I can't see a situation where Mikheyev is really in the stands, and Nick Ritchie is obviously going to be playing every night. So between Nick Robertson, Kampf, and then Kerfoot moving around in there, and Bunting, and then obviously Robertson, I just see Robertson kind of being the odd man out because you have guys with a little bit more experience until Robertson can get his feet under him, show that he does belong on a nightly basis. I just kind of opening night, I'm I don't know if he necessarily gets in there. Now,
yeah, okay.
My only counter, Josh, to your point about the left wingers not having as much scoring depth, I don't know if the positional scoring matters as much if like your right side is so loaded and your centers are so strong. I don't think I understand what you're saying, because like when you look at like Nick Ritchie, Michael Bunting, let's go to mine. Nick Ritchie, Alex Kerfoot, Michael Bunting, Ilya Mikheyev. Mikheyev, not a goal scorer. I clearly saw that last year. Kerfoot, same thing. Michael Bunting, we got no idea. Like, small sample size, it looks like he could be a goal scorer, but like over a real long stretch, playing on a legitimate team, we don't know what he is. And then Nick Ritchie, he's not necessarily like a world beater goal scorer. Like, this guy is a physical guy who can get some points, but he's not going to go out there and score 30, 40 goals. So I understand what you're saying. That being said, I think if your right side and your centers can score that many goals, I don't think just looking at left wing and being like, oh, these guys can't score that many goals is that concerning. Especially like when you go in the offensive zone, it's much different in terms of just the fluidity of offensive play. So I'm not as concerned about it.
No, it can get jumbled for sure. I'm just looking up and down the lineup, trying to balance a little bit of
For sure.
physicality, scoring, and I just find that half of your left wingers just seem to have a bit of an identity crisis where we don't know what Bunting's going to be like.
Yeah.
We know what Robertson's going to be like because we've been watching him, kind of grooming him through the organization.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a special player, so I'm eager to get him in on opening night personally. Maybe that's more of a sentimental vibe, but I think he's ready. Mm-hmm. That's my personal opinion. Whether or not it's going to work with the current makeup of the team, I don't know, but I'm still hopeful he starts with the team, even if it means you maybe pop him up to the second line and move Bunting down. I actually wouldn't hate that move. And you mentioned you don't think Mikheyev will be sitting. If that happens, if Mikheyev sits, I think he's going back to Russia. So I don't think that'll happen either.
Yeah. Okay, now moving on to D. So our defense, I'll start off with mine because mine is pretty bland. Mine is pretty as expected, and then we'll move on to yours and break it down. So straight up, we got, for me, our first pair, Morgan Rielly, TJ Brodie, Jake Muzzin, Justin Hall, and then Rasmus Sandin and Travis Sturman. Unless the Leafs go out here and move one of these 7th D that they signed last week, I believe it was, that would be Alex Biega or Carl Dahlstrom into that spot in place of Dermott. I can't see Sandin coming out. I could see Dermott being on a carousel of 3 to 4 defensemen going in and out. But other than that, I would say Rielly, Brodie, Muzzin, Hall, Sandin are pretty locked in there, and then Dermott could be in and out, but that's kind of how I see this playing out. It's kind of what we had last year, other than Bogosian being a more consistent piece in there. He's obviously moved on, so I think Dermott steps up and fills that role more.
Yep. Well, I'm going to go with something a little bit more abstract here. Go figure. I tend to say these kind of things, but Rielly and Brodie, Muzzin and Sandin, Dermott and Hall. I just see it as a worthy experiment, especially this early in Sandin's career with how versatile he's looked, to try and see if he can play on his offside. Because I think that giving him second pairing minutes will give you way more than continuing to usher Justin Hall into that second pairing. If it doesn't work out, whatever, it'll be early in the season. We'll figure it out from there. We'll readjust. But I think that if you can get it rolling, try to keep it rolling with that, because ideally you want Sandin on the ice more often than you want Justin Hall. I don't dislike Justin Hall, but I'll be honest, I don't like him. Like, he is what he is. You know, I'm very neutral on Justin Hall. He gets the job done. He's basically what I feel like I should feel about a third pair defenseman. At times I honestly feel like Dermott does a fair bit more. So, but to put him and Dermott together, I still think you're very solid. You're very defensively sound. Dermott still has some offensive upside. Hall surprisingly does get points. I don't really know how. He doesn't have a ton of skill to the untrained eye, but I still think I would try to move Sandin up, get more out of this kid. And while he's young, before he's too integrated and used to one thing, I know he's been playing hockey his whole life, presumably on his right side, but at the NHL level, if you can give him that kind of guidance, a good veteran partner like Muzzin, maybe you could make it happen. And I'd rather give him those minutes.
Yeah, it is interesting because I would like to see him playing second line minutes as well, second pairing minutes as well, just being on the ice more, having more opportunity to play better matchups and stuff. And then I think part of it too is that if he ends up playing on that third D pair in my scenario with Travis Dermott, he's not going to be as relied upon as much because I don't think Dermott is as trusted of a defenseman, whereas I think that in your case, Muzzin is. So they would feel much more comfortable putting them out in those scenarios. That being said, I can see line fluidity like we saw in the playoffs with Sandin getting a lot of minutes with Brody heading out there on the ice and then like going in and out of situations like that. My only thing is like when I look at Tampa, there's obviously some significant roster differences. Obviously, our defense doesn't have Victor Hedman. You'd basically have to swap out Morgan Riley and put Victor Hedman in, or like a true number one, in my opinion, into that Morgan Riley spot, because I think Brody is a perfect number two. And then I would say Muzzin Hall could be very comparable to the second D pairs that Tampa had with McDonough, and I think they had Chernak on that second D pair. And then the third D pair, which I could see a very, very, very similar situation, is Sergachev plays on that third D pair in Tampa. The big problem is that the guy that Sergachev plays with is significantly better than Travis Dermott. Like they were putting Savard with Sergachev. And Travis Dermott is not even half the defenseman that Savard is.
Yeah, and I just feel like we don't have that kind of roster to make it so that we can afford to shift guys around like up and down. I feel like you should try to put up, especially a young talent that you want to develop at a rapid pace, give him those second line minutes. I know what you mean from a fluidity standpoint, but Tampa kind of had that ball rolling already. So I think that they were relying on already some existing chemistry they didn't want to touch with, chemistry they had proven to get working. I think on our hand, we got to find our stride. Hall didn't impress me in the playoffs. I think moving him down, you're still going to have Hall in the lineup every night doing good things, but you're going to be less reliant on him. You're going to get more playmaking. You're going to get more production out of your blue line with Sandin playing up, and Muzzin's there to kind of protect him a little bit. Like I just feel like, you know, Dermott's not going to do a whole lot to protect Sandin, I feel like, out there, and not that you really need it. And we already talked about how Sandin's done a better job of protecting himself. I just like the offset there of skill, because it almost seems like they contrast each other perfectly, Muzzin and Sandin. Like Sandin a little faster, better at breaking out the puck. I find Muzzin can be sometimes choppy with the puck, a little bit slower, but very large, more physical, harder shot. I just feel like it's a nice contrast, and to get the second line minutes to Sandin is just the most important part of it, or second pair minutes. But
yeah, no, I agree. I just think that it like moving him up into that spot in a position where he hasn't played the off wing or the offside, could be a bit uncomfortable, which there's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable. I guess part of it too, though, is that in a lot of ways, I don't necessarily know if I trust Hall and Dermott playing together. I think the reason that Hall's game is where it is at is because he plays with Muzzin, and it's like the reason he's has such a safety net, or he's so comfortable, is because of the safety net that Muzzin provides him. And Dermott does not provide that safety net. So you kind of end up with a wild card third pairing if that goes to that situation.
But isn't that a massive floor raiser then? Like, I feel like we're almost coddling Justin Hall at times. Like, isn't it a really big floor raiser to go and put Sandin with Muzzin and have him receive all that upside that Hall gets, but then being able to reiterate it because he contrasts Muzzin really well, like I just said. And you know what? And Hall and Dermott aren't slouch defensemen either, but I think they're more true to a third pairing.
No, agreed. But I think that if Hall
experiment
goes in there with Muzzin, then you know what you're getting. You're getting a consistent shutdown second D pair, and I understand what you're saying with like how moving them in and out, or like it could elevate Sandin's game the way that he elevates Hall's game. I think that the problem is that when you weigh them, he could elevate Sandin's game to a significant amount, but could Hall's game decrease to an amount that outweighs what Sandin's does on that second pair? Like, could you get to a point where you have an unplayable third line? Like, we don't know that, like, I don't know if it could get to that point. We don't really know for sure. Whereas you know that if Hall goes up into that second pair and plays with Muzzin consistently, you do get a solid shutdown second pair, and you don't have to rely on them from scoring. They can both shoot, they can both break the puck out, and they play well together. They are comfortable together for sure.
Well, and that's why I think it would have to be an early season experiment. Maybe opening night. I'd like to see it opening night, but I know opening night's very much about having the team operating the way they normally operate, and then after a few games, then you start to play around with things.
Mm-hmm.
However, I would like to see early on maybe a potential change like that. Again, I just want the minutes for Sandin, and I like the contrast you would bring Muzzin. And I still think it's a pretty solid third pairing. It's just going to depend on how they do. I think that honestly, Dermott's so hungry to prove himself and kind of regain that status he had with the Leafs early on in his career that they will get some production out of him. And I think Hall, if that happens, like he better take a chip on his shoulder and make the most of the opportunity on the third pairing. And if it breaks him, then I'm done coddling Justin Hall if that happens. And Hall also, he didn't impress me in the playoffs. Like there was a few goals that were really important that got scored against him where I was like he isn't always quick enough. He isn't always hard enough on the puck. I know he does a lot of things like well, but for a second pairing guy that's going to be facing that quality of opposing talent, I don't know. I'm starting to lean toward maybe a change on our blue line, but nothing too drastic, just shifting those two guys. But you're right. It has big implications. So it would need to be an experiment, but I'm still hopeful that it happens at some point.
Yeah. All right. And then last thing here, our goaltending. I don't know about you, but I personally just predict it being a tandem scenario. I think that you ride the hot hand. Whoever's playing well, they get the net. Back to back, switch it up, go with the other guy. If he plays well, if he shuts out a team, ride him again. Like, you just keep going with whoever's hot. Let them play it out. Let them battle it out for whoever's going to be the better goalie going into the playoff scenario. I don't see a 1 and a 2. I see 1A, 1B, and I think they're pretty interchangeable here. I think the guy they're going to lean towards for opening night as a starter would probably be Jack Campbell. That being said, he's got to stay healthy. As long as he can stay healthy, I think that for the most part it is his net, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that plays 60-plus games. I think him and Mrazek will probably be close to a 50-50 split in this net. But I think that in a bigger scenario or a more relied upon scenario, it'll probably be Jack Campbell.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, but I would call it at the gate on opening night 1-2 for Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell being the 1,
yeah,
Mrazek being the 2, and if nothing changes, I wouldn't feel any pressure to put them on like that 50-50 situation because we haven't seen one bad thing from Jack Campbell in the Leafs jersey.
Yeah,
one of some of the best stats in the playoffs, some of the best stats in the regular season. Lovable guy. Like to me, there's literally nothing. Other than the fact he looks like a road hockey goalie, which is an awkward look for your number 1. I think that he's got to be your true starter out the gate. If he starts to struggle a little bit, open up the gate for a 1A, 1B situation to happen. But that also means Mrazek needs to prove himself.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a really good acquisition, especially for the contract. But yeah, out the gate, I think Campbell needs to be looked at as your starter.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much does it for our lineup projections for this coming season. As things move along and throughout the rest of this summer, there's only like a month left until guys start heading back to camps. I think season was a little bit later this year than usual, but that being said, it's closer to being back on track. So as things start to, more news starts to come out, if more signings happen, we'll be back breaking it down. But as of this current moment, this is the way we see these lineups shaking out for night 1, for opening night rosters. There's obviously a lot that can change. There's news that's going to come out. There's guys that are going to perform and not perform in camps. So we'll see how that all goes. But until then, till we find out more news, Leafs fans, keep believing.